Today, I'm happy to introduce Teresa Gonzales, who will be leading our discussion on cultivating shared leadership for a sustainable organizational and community impact through co-design. And before I pass it over to Teresa to lead us, I would like to ask Lyndon, our team member, to introduce Teresa and how we got to this point.
Great. Thank you, Miriam. And welcome, everyone. I'm Lyndon Rago. I'm on the board of the Leadership Forum. And I have a bit of an association that extends, I don't know, more than 10 years with Teresa's firm, Design Impact. So they're a nonprofit design firm that works on social challenges, does terrific work. We've partnered with them on work both in the United States, but also in India. And one of the things that I became aware about in terms of what Design Impact does is that it has a very strong and clear perspective on creating social change, positive social change. And I got invited a year or so ago to join the board of Design Impact, and I got to meet Teresa for the first time. And I was really impressed because one of the things that I didn't know was that how Design Impact operates, not only what it provides to the world, which is some of what I was familiar with, but how it operates on the inside. And you know, with many organizations, we've got this issue of the shoemaker's shoes, that they might offer something to the world, but it doesn't reflect what they truly represent on the inside. And I think that's a function really of the commitment of what people like Teresa have brought in. And so just a little bit of Teresa's background, and I'm reading from her bio here, but it's really impressive. So Teresa Gonzales is a native of New Mexico and a fourth-generation descendant of the Apache and Comanche Indians of the Southwest. You know, first-generation college student, the mother of 4 kids. And it says, you know, again, some of what her history has been about and her commitment to social justice. She was caged and displaced as a child. She was a low-wage worker at the age of 12, received her high school credentials at a youth detention facility at the age of 16. And, you know, these experiences have really shaped, you know, what is a very deep commitment to social justice, liberation, indigenous sovereignty, enacting health and justice in any space that she can work in. And so she brings this really to Design Impact. She's got a Bachelor of Business Administration, a Master of Science in Community Health, and got a work history that has won her a lot of recognition for actually moving the needle on social change. So when I got to know Teresa a little bit more, and was so impressed with what they're doing to actually build an organization that's not only creating change in the world, but is actually living that change on the inside. I was really pleased to have the opportunity to invite her to come and speak to our community. So over to you, Teresa, and thank you for making the time today to be with us.
Thank you so much, Lyndon. Thank you to the Leadership Forum for this invitation. I'm really excited for all the participants that joined. I wish I could be in all of the small breakouts later so I could hear everything that you all are sharing, but I look forward to the larger group discussion at the end. So I could learn from you all equally. Like that's really been, I think, the most significant thing for me is like how much I'm learning intergenerationally, interculturally. And, you know, that's what this work is all about, right? As you think about leadership. And so this topic has resonated the most for me because not just the work that we do at Design Impact, but I've worked as an executive director for nonprofits, small to mid-sized nonprofits, really with grassroots leaders, and working on the ground with those who are most impacted by the issues. And I've noticed that a lot of time the nonprofit, you know, sector and a lot of the social change work that we engage in is always focused on the external facing work, which is the most important aspect is community. But recognizing that, you know, the congruence needs to be happening internally as well in terms of how we lead and how do we build structures, right, that are sustainable, right? Because I think everybody's worried about like their existence, like we're trying to work ourselves out of a job, but while we actually have to function, we want to do it well, and we want to make sure that we're investing equally internally so that way we can have the greatest and most sustainable and healthy impact externally. So more about design impact. Lyndon shared a bit, but we are a social innovation nonprofit consultancy firm. So we're a catalyst, convener, capacity builder, working with large systems, even philanthropy and grant makers and other large nonprofits to help them better engage with community, and also to ensure that there's equity. And we're thinking about creative ways to enact change. I think a lot of our work in the nonprofit sector is about like dismantling systems. And, but what I love the most about design impact is that we help people to envision a better world. And so we do a lot of that through our process, which I'll share in a minute. But it really also elevates the leadership of community internally and externally. So just an overview of what we're going to be covering today. So I'm going to be sharing some best practices and tools that we are using at Design Impact and that we use also with the clients that we work with, our partners, whether they're leaders, individual leaders, or they are nonprofits, or they're change makers or designers, and thinking around how do they engage co-design to build power through sustainable structures that ensure community impact. And so some of the things we'll learn about is organizational models, values, and decision-making practices and structures. And then we'll move into self-awareness practices that awaken cultural humility and wholeness. And then we will wrap up with moving from conflict and tension to trust and consensus building. I know that this is, working in several senior leadership roles, but also being a staff person, volunteer, advocate, frontline worker. Like these are things that we're all concerned about or care deeply about in terms of how do we do this work together and we do it well? And then also how do we offer that to community, and what is the benefit and the value to community? So what is co-design? So the way that we define it is it's an approach that strives to actively and equitably involve all impacted communities in the design process. And so, when we think about all these systems and structures, a lot of them are rooted in oppression and a lot of, systemic issues that have been harmful, especially to people of color and folks that are vulnerable and oftentimes really detached from the resources, the power, and the solutions, which they can only define for themselves, right? And that's why a lot of these large institutions oftentimes have these lofty goals that are oftentimes disconnected from the realities that the community is facing. So our process invites folks to reflect and to invite impacted groups to express what they want to need. And it brings in, sort of the design aspect of like, what can we build together? How can we be the architects of our future? And we do it alongside folks in a transformative way that it invites everybody to the table and is not exclusive. So it's an inclusive and equitable based approach. So this is our co-design process. So this is like how we engage with our partners, but this is also how we engage internally with one another. We always think about like ground zero is developing relationships. Like you have to build relationships with the people you're working with and really understand them. Values alignment, understanding the underpinnings of the issue or the challenge at hand, right? Because we've been here before. A lot of times we're not starting from scratch. We understand the issue, but we need to invite all of the perspectives from the beginning. And then we have to have intentional time to plan for the work and prepare together to align on goals, our process, the timeline, and be really clear about the outcomes that we want to achieve. Then once we align on sort of the larger, goal, approach, and when and how, then we move into discovery phase. It's really important that we, and a lot of people call this research, but like internally and externally, what is the landscape, right? Who do we need to be talking to from impacted communities? How do we invite them in to help to steward the process? And also, just making connections and having a lot of exploratory conversations. And also an important aspect is gathering data, right? Not just quantitative data, but qualitative data, understanding people's stories, inviting them in to understand their narrative and what's going to be most important and valuable. And so we need to do all of these things before we begin to imagine and design, right? What it is that we want to achieve, or what product or thing that we want to develop together, right? It could be a concept, it could be a practice or a policy or an intervention. And again, this also is internally and externally as we think about organizations. Then after we identify like what, we ideate, we brainstorm, we think about what is the best, possible goal that or ambition that we can achieve, then we have to pause and test and refine it first. A lot of times we invest a lot of money or resources or time into concepts or ideas and just kind of at a really large scale without testing it in a small way to make sure that it's effective and that we're also understanding all of the complexities of it, the nuances, and making sure that we get it really tight before we scale it out larger. And so that could be a project. Again, it could be a practice, it could be a policy. And then once we test and refine it, then we decide, do we want to scale it? What's next? And so that is also ensuring that there's a commitment to implement the actual work and thinking about sustainability. What is this going to require of us resource-wise? And what we're talking about, all the different types of capital, right? Human, social, cultural, intellectual capital. What is it going to require for us to sustain this work long term? So that's a little bit about our co-design process. So the next the first, this is the out of the 3 content areas, this is the first. And so I'm going to start with sharing organizational models that are horizontal or what some may call flat models, but horizontal or distributive leadership models. And I'm just going to share a couple of examples. So this is not an exhaustive list of everything that we know is happening in community, but based on what we are doing ourselves, right? Because we are the work, and that's where it begins. And so I'm going to start with organizational models, and we're going to move into values, and then we're going to talk about decision-making frameworks. So this is our shared leadership model. So in my organization, we have a small team, and it's maybe complicated as you build out, or if you have a larger team. But in essence, we don't have me as the executive director, the principal executive, I don't make all the decisions in the organization. All of the decisions in what we call our strategic planning lies within different squads. They're similar to committees, and they focus on really clear areas around our mission. So we have our mission and strategy under the deliver our mission, run a type ship, that's finance operations and HR compliance. Then we have develop our team, which is organizational culture, professional development, recruitment and retention. Then we have run impactful projects. It's like making sure our projects themselves are done in the best way possible. And we're learning from one another. And we're also, we're learning from community, we're learning from ourselves, and then we're applying that directly into the work with community. And then developing strong partners, that's about partnership development, fundraising, also communications and sharing our stories. So we have that specific squad focused on that. And then we have innovate on our work. Some people would call this like traditionally research and development, but this is how we build, and we're creative around thinking about like what's new out there, how are we relevant, to the needs of the community, and being able to create new things and new ways of approaching our work internally and externally. So that's just one example of a model of that leans into horizontal or shared leadership, where everyone gets the opportunity to make decisions at the organization. And we also allot time internally for all staff to participate in the internal organizational development. So we build our formula in that all of the directors that are doing the client-facing or community-facing work, they spend 70% of their time doing that, and then 30% of their time is allocated towards helping us to build a sustainable organizational model that is rooted and relevant. And so this is an example of a partner organization that also has a shared leadership model, and there's a spectrum to that. Some people have co-directors, some people have everybody in the organization has the same title, but this is just an example to kind of get your brains, to fuel your brains around what is possible. But you have to be thinking about compensation and equitable workload. So it's really important that you have these structures in place. It's not just that like everybody makes a decision about everything, and like we have to have really clear parameters around certain things and making sure everybody has input and that we're all in agreement about how we move these things forward. So you want to think about salaries, right? The compensation philosophy and the methodology on how you do that. You want to benchmark things. You also want to make sure that there is a clear, that staff are clear about what does promotion and advancement look like. We also look at task distribution, who's doing what. I think at Design Impact, we're all unicorns right now, and we're trying to, I think, readjust our model. We're in that process right now because we're constantly iterating on ourselves and making sure that, staff feel supported and that they are leaning into their strengths and gifts while maintaining the organizational need to run a business, right? And be accountable to community. And then thinking about how do we encourage our team to have autonomy and also be responsible, right? And have, self-leadership. So these are just some things to consider as we think about shared leadership models and how to institutionalize or operationalize that internally. So organizational values. So you really, if you're going to lean into any kind of shared leadership, you have to be really clear about what your values are. And not just around the internal infrastructure of your team, but also being clear about your values and the types of projects you engage with, the types of partners you invite into to do the work. You want to make sure community is clear about what your values are and what you consider most important as you do the work, and that'll help you get through some of the most challenging times you'll experience. For us, our organizational values, we call them cultural statements, and this is just 3 out of several that we have, but it really just shares like our beliefs and values and our practices and make it explicit and visible. And so one of them is self-leadership is rooted in accountability, trust, and growth. Another one is equitable wholeness requires us to disrupt systems of oppression, share power, connect deeply, and claim joy. And then a third one is creative evolutionary purpose honors our innate worthiness and abundance as paths to collective liberation. And we have the full list. It's actually posted on our website, so you're more than welcome to borrow from these. Use them to inspire conversations you're having around values. But values is one of the most important aspects of engaging in shared leadership. So we have a shared decision-making framework. Again, flat models sometimes can get complicated if folks are not clear around the decision-making domains, or how does someone introduce an idea or a recommendation, and who is able to do that? Is it only people who have a formal title or a formal power in the organization? So for us, we adopted this and adapted it to our needs, and it's from the Liberating Organizations Handbook that is publicly shared by Sandra Kim. And so we're a part of a couple of networks nationwide called like Nonprofit Democracy Network and Sustainable Economies Law Center, who help us to also think about different practices and tools that we could use. So for this, we have a clear path around how do people submit an idea around something they want to change internally in the organization. So they submit a proposal, and they can work with someone else on it, or they can submit it independently, and it goes to the appropriate squad who has that sort of purview or decision-making power over that specific topic. And then they share that proposal, the team reviews it together. Sometimes if it's a big organizational recommendation, it'll come before the whole staff, right? Versus squads. But we typically always jump to like, what are the challenges that we're facing, but we want to encourage people to talk about what they appreciate about the idea instead of always raising concerns. So just having a balanced way that we introduce and frame things is super important. And so people have time to ask questions about the idea, and then share even their personal feelings or ideas and things that are coming up for them. And then after that, if we don't have any major issues or concerns that are raised, well, we vote on it first, and then if you go to the next slide, here we have, we take a vote, and then it basically is like a fist means I want to block this idea from moving forward until my serious objections are sufficiently addressed. And then 1 is I don't like the proposal and want to discuss my questions or concerns more. 2 is I don't like the proposal, but it doesn't feel that serious or needs further discussion. 3 is I feel neutral, like I'm okay with it. It doesn't matter either way. I don't have any strong opinions about it. 4 is I like the proposal, I'm good with moving it forward. And then 5 is I like the proposal and want to be responsible for implementing it. And this is a way of engaging everybody in the process of decision-making, and also being real clear about where people stand in terms of the actual change or proposed change, so they can actually participate in rolling it out. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is just, we're gonna have just 5 minutes for a small group discussion. We're gonna put you on breakout rooms and just explore as we think about organizational models, values, and the decision-making protocols that I shared or others that you all have experienced, like what is resonating for you, sharing any experiences you have or challenges or successes, and then any ideas or curiosity. So we wanna move you all into these rooms so you guys can talk a little bit about what I just shared. The most important thing is to understand that like there's always room for growth. And there's not a perfect organization, right? But, and again, you know, there's a lot of organizations that don't have the ability, right, to just move into shared leadership, but what are ways that you can take, you know, baby steps and get there? And it's also good to just see that other people are doing it and it is effective. So if you ever want to see more case studies of other organizations that are doing it or our work, we're more than happy to share that with your team. Okay, we're going to move into the next part of the discussion. So self-awareness and cultural humility. So we want, like, as individual leaders, we have to embody, right, shared leadership. It's not just also, again, like we have to have the structures, but it's always like being self-aware as a leader is one of the most important and critical guidance that I've ever received in terms of my leadership, and then also my ability to share that with others who are leading and making decisions in the organization. And what we do is we talk about cultural humility, not cultural competence. Cultural humility is a whole entire framework for another conversation, but we do engage in those pillars, which are lifelong learning and critical self-reflection as individuals, recognizing and changing power imbalances as a team and within our organization, and even the external work that we're doing and the systems that are involved in causing that or perpetuating harm. And then developing institutional accountability. So being really clear about what we have power and control over in our external work, but also internally, and making sure that we are developing those systems of accountability or practices around accountability. One of the things that we feel is super important around inspiring wholeness for everyone, including, you know, whoever's in the leadership role or leadership roles, is we do centering in everything that we do. So like if we're having a staff meeting, we're going to start with just a check-in, like how are people feeling right now? Folks may come into the room and have just experienced a major tragedy, and we would never know about it if we're not checking in. And so sometimes we'll make assumptions about where people are at or want them to engage more, but giving everybody permission to show up as a human in a space. And so that's really important to do in our community facing work as well, is like just checking in. And it could relieve so much tension that an individual might be facing, or you know, moving the team forward a little bit more intentionally. We do tapping and panning as well, is, you know, just sort of assessing what's going on around us, just to be more rooted and present, because, you know, folks have trauma. We have other things that, you know, we're dealing with life. And panning is just like sort of taking a minute to like look outside of the window, take a minute to look at something in front of you and just kind of redirect ourselves so we can be present with each other. And so because we do anti-oppression work and work around equity, we do hold to the white supremacy culture tenets and understand that we have to address this intentionally and explicitly, but we're also like recognize that we can't, you know, change things in the world overnight. And so we don't get lost in global conversations, but really focusing on what we have the ability to control. So we create space for affinity groups. So we have a white affinity group, we have a people of color, a BIPOC affinity group, where we're able to connect and say, like, how is work feeling for you these days? What are some things that you're excited about, want to celebrate? What are some challenges you might be facing you want to bring up to the group? We have a racial accountability statement, just to be clear with our partners, what we do and do not do. Like, we're not a magic bullet, we can't solve everything, but what can we do around equity? And just making sure that we're grounded in understanding that racism and other forms of discrimination are real for folks. And then we have equity anchors, and I'm going to share that with you in a minute. But we have also really intentional strategic investments in the wellness and professional development of our team. So we have holistic professional development where people get to decide what they want to spend their professional development on. It doesn't have to tie to their performance goals. It could be like, hey, you know, I want to. One staff member said that, you know, she is she comes from the API community and wanted to explore her identity a little bit more. She did a whole photo shoot around her identity to help her feel more connected. And so as an adoptee, and so she, you know, it just really raised her confidence as a leader in the organization, and had a direct benefit. And more than that we're able to just celebrate her work. We build in restoration hours into our project work. We have a peer coaching model, so we don't have traditional supervision. People have peer coaches that they check in with, and then they get to like self-select, and then also have regular touch points with them for support. And then we have a 4-day work week. And a lot of people are leaning into that more and more, but it's not really about like, honestly, if you give people more time back, you see performance and productivity actually increase. But we can dive into that later, or if you guys are, welcome to reach out to me so I can share a little bit more. So these are our equity anchors, and a little bit to like Charles's question around how do we institutionalize, or measure what we're doing. But part of it is like we have to have this in front of us all the time so we can remember, right? To be self-aware. And there's some things that we forget, right? In the busyness of the work, we forget to check in on some things that are really important. And for us, we have these equity anchors, and we're happy to share these with you. And you guys are more than welcome to take them and, revamp them and use them for yourself. But this is how we keep ourselves accountable. So when we have squad meetings or we have staff meetings, we ask ourselves these questions. Is our work clear, transparent, and accessible to everyone on staff? Does our work decentralize and distribute power? Do we recognize defensiveness as a signal of fear? Do we acknowledge conflict and tension? Do we embrace divergent possibilities? Do we value lived experience? Do we think about both and versus either or in our ideas and decisions? Do we honor wholeness, recognize trauma? Do we invite feedback, collaboration, and co-creation? And does our work provide space for people of color on our team to feel seen, heard, and valued? And so we sometimes will just everyone will pick one and say like, or they'll pick one in that moment to say like, what's resonating for you? Which one do you think we need to work on more, or something that you feel like we're doing well on? And then that way everybody can just like pick one, or we just remind ourselves that this is what we need to be thinking about in our work. So I just shared the equity anchors and then ways that you can tap into being more self-aware as a leader, and then also ways that you can invest in the team to make sure that they have the ability to be whole and human, and also, investing in their wellness. So we're gonna pause here and go back into the breakouts, and it'll be random assignment again. But if you can share, what is coming up for you as we explore these and other ones that you might be familiar with that work well. So sharing your experiences or any ideas or curiosities. So they're the same questions as before, but specific to self-awareness and cultural humility. That one went by quicker. Where are we at in terms of time?
We have 15 minutes left.
Okay, I can wrap this up, the last one.
The anchors are so interesting. I can't wait for you to send the slides and
yeah, so
life. Yeah.
Yeah, so I did like a snapshot of some things, and so I can share out the full documents and tools as a part of the I'm not sure if you send out the slide deck to everybody. I know the recording is published, but it would be good too to attach some of these tools and resources. Like even the Liberating Organizations Handbook. Oh, it's such a gem. It's such a gem.
We will include those, right? In the email. Yeah.
Okay, I'll make sure to get everything to you. I'm gonna try to actually get it out to you all by the end of today, so that way you guys are able to maybe attach it to the presentation or an email out to the participants.
Oh my God, that's so much fruitful information.
I know it's hard. It's hard. It's like there's so much more I wanted to share too. And I'm just like, just pick like
1 hour is
two or three things in each topic area just to get people's wheels spinning.
Yeah. I'm wondering, so Charles had two questions. Probably he asked you in
Yeah,
the
I think it
group,
was,
right?
he didn't ask me that, well, he did, he asked about how do we measure these. I didn't talk about the funding, but I can speak to that.
Mm. And also, I think Joel mentioned that the question came up about how to measure shared leadership for accountability.
Oh yeah, so we addressed that one inside of the group. I wasn't able to share it out fully with everybody, but the next one of the slides that I'm going to show in the next topic area, it actually includes that.
Oh, that's great. Amazing. One more minute and they will be back.
Perfect. There was one slide on here that I didn't see, and it was at the beginning, but I don't know, I guess I deleted it.
What slide was that? Maybe I can see.
Oh, it was around community impact. It was slide 10. And maybe if like right at the end, we can just pop that up as I wrap things up, that would be great.
Slide 10.
Yeah, do you see it? It says community impact.
I see it. Okay, where would you
Just
like me to move that to?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Where would you like me to move that to?
Oh, you know what? I can actually move it. I'm gonna just move it right to the
Oh,
end.
okay.
Okay,
Perfect.
that actually makes sense. And I'm thinking maybe, and I'll message you, Miriam.
okay.
All right, is everybody back?
Yeah, everyone's coming back slowly.
Hey everyone. Okay, I just want to say I know it's a lot of content and I'm moving through it quickly. Plus, I talk really fast. So I probably should have warned you in advance. So apologies if things feel really rushed. But this is, just to kind of get the wheels turning, right? Okay, so we're going to move into the next topic area. Which is how do we move from conflict and tension to trust and consensus building? I think this is something that everyone experiences and it's just really important. So there's a couple of things I wanted to share with you around this topic was, number one, there needs to be a way that you can understand your organizational culture and have a way to kind of zoom out of the day-to-day and be able to do pulse checks with your team. So we have surveys. We were doing them every year, but now we're doing them like every 2 years. And then we have quarterly pulse checks that a dedicated peer inside of the organization checks in with everyone to say, like, how's work feeling for you lately? Like, is there anything that you want to share that's working well? Are there any challenges you're experiencing? And if anything comes up major, we're able to get that information as early as possible in a timely way so we can address it. But here, I just want to say that like you can have the best strategies, you can have the best policies and practices in place. and even related to the external community facing work. But if you have a lot of tension or conflict that's happening inside of the organization, like it's not going to be successful. So you have to address this explicitly rather than like being conflict avoidant, which some organizations are. And so in terms of when we do hear back feedback from staff, either at the individual level, at the organizational level, through our culture surveys, whenever we discover what the issue is, we always frame how we're going to respond to it in an invitation. So we do this externally with our projects too, because they're working with community and we want to make sure they're doing things in a very holistic, in a very intentional way. And so we use how might we statements, and which means that like there's no I's here, it's a we. I mean, obviously individually you got to be committed before we could get to the we, but really it's about how you frame the solutions. It's like, how might we build lasting organizational impact and community transformation through embodied leadership? How might we activate power across our team in a way that values cultural humility, trust, and courage? How might we, address whatever this issue is that you're facing, right? So the invitation and the way that you frame it is super important, especially when you're delivering information and people are sharing things that are very vulnerable for them. Okay, so we have clear feedback structures. So I mentioned 360 evaluation. I have a slide on that next I'll talk about. We also give people room to process feedback in small groups, and then also coaching opportunities. So we have folks that are able to like step in and support. So we have the peer model, and then we also have project teams are able to work together to assess like how are things working between us as a team. And so we build that in intentionally because it really helps the work move forward and to address things early on that might be coming up for folks. Then we don't talk about, we don't use the performance management term because there's a lot of trauma involved in that. We talked about it in one of the breakouts earlier, but we talk about it as leadership development. Everyone is a leader in the organization. We're all developing and growing as individuals, personally and professionally. And that requires really clear organizational goals and the individuals to have autonomy over how they set goals for themselves. And then also with some really tangible ways that they can achieve those goals. And we use the SMART framework for that with the addition of the IE, which is also incorporates inclusion and equity. This is how we do the 360. I never thought it was possible. Not only have I've worked as a leader in several organizations, but I've done capacity building in numerous, like I'm talking like hundreds of nonprofits over the past 24 years of me doing this work. And I didn't imagine that a performance review system could be this simple, and it could be this easy and also in a positive experience. Like a lot of folks have trauma with these types of performance review systems or very conservative or traditional ways. So with us, how do we get feedback from each other? We just basically ask a couple of questions. How is this person leaning into our theory of change? How is this person living into our cultural statements? And then it's like any other feedback or ideas that you want to share with this person. And so we all do it together. So so instead of saying like, go figure out go get, like you need to carve out time to give feedback, like we create spaces together where we can do it because it's just always a hard thing to get people to do from an HR perspective. Those of you who know, it's really difficult. And sometimes it's hard to even talk about yourself or set even goals for yourself as well. So based on this feedback, then we move into individual goal setting, and then it aligns with the organizational goals. And so we have 3 goals. It's a professional development goal. We have a how can you grow, like grow and advance yourself as a professional? So it's more of like a growth goal or stretch goal. And then the third one is a personal goal. Like I want to start walking every day during my lunch breaks. And, it could be totally personal they have the ability to share if they want to, and then they could ask the team, how can we support you? Like, I'm going to be off camera in the mornings because I'm walking my dog while I'm in staff meeting. And so that way people are really clear that this isn't a really important goal for your wellness. So tending to the fire. So this is a book that has been really helpful for me as an individual person and professional. And really like and I probably should have started with this slide, but really a person's relationship with conflict is a lot of times rooted in adverse childhood experiences and how they communicate or how they respond to any tensions that are happening or disagreements. So the most important thing I would encourage anyone, right, that's doing work in teams or working, you know, in community is like, when you have fiery situations, whether it's a challenge or a conflict or a disagreement, you have to think of it as an opportunity, right? An opportunity to get closer to a community, get closer to your team, and understand the differences that you share. But shouldn't be framed as a negative experience. And if you look at different ways of defining conflict, there's an asset-based way to look at it, and there's a deficit way to look at it. But encourage folks to tend to that fire, because oftentimes fire comes from personal values or priorities that people have, or things that are really important to them. So it's important that you see the conflict as an opportunity. And I always tell leaders, especially for those of you who are executives or in senior leadership roles, if you do not address these conflicts explicitly, the conversations are still going to happen, but you're not going to be invited to those conversations. So I always say, you make sure that you create space for your team. So if they want to connect with one another and then away from you, and then bring some ideas to you, or, you know, creating intentional spaces for you all to come together to address the things that are coming up. But these are just some tools or some practices around self-awareness, having an open mind, being ready for dancing with surprises, and standing with compassion. So be ready for something to shift in the middle of a room that you didn't expect, and don't panic, right? Allow things to flow, and just trust that, you know, everything that's coming up needs to happen in its appointed time. I focused a lot of internal development in organizations, and how you do that transformation. But I wanted to be super clear that oftentimes people don't understand the return on investment in community. Now, I feel as an executive director or someone in any senior leadership role that has decision-making authority, that if we should never have to worry about community if we are tending to the important things that our team needs in order to be successful. An organization should be a place of refuge. It should be a place where you're equipped with all the right resources and tools. And because the social change work is difficult, and being out in community, a lot of folks, especially folks on the front lines, are experiencing a lot of harm and hardship vicariously and also directly, and especially if they have their own lived experience. So my job, and this is how I view it personally, is that my perspective is that my job is to make sure that the conditions are conducive, right, to a healthy work environment. There's enough sun, there's enough water, right? And when we think about the resources that staff need, you know, they're able to cultivate like a garden, right? But they can't do that if they don't have the right tools or resources, right? To take care of themselves. And then if you tend to the conditions, the soil, and also the resources, then you're going to produce, right? In terms of the community, as it relates to community needs. So I'm going to wrap that up there, and would love to, if you all want to just share anything in the chat that kind of is, you know, as you think about any key takeaways from this session or things you want to dig deeper into. And I'll take this information back. I'm going to share these slides, and also the tools that I included. I'm going to share the entirety of that tool with you all as a follow-up. And this session will also be recorded and published online, so you guys can have access to it as well. So if there's any key takeaways you want to share in the chat, and then thank you all so much, and apologies for going over time. We did start a little bit late.
Thank you, Teresa.